Director for Public Affairs here in the great city of Richmond. We have a slight change, so we'll start with Mayor Avula, followed by Councilmember Brenton, Sean Crippen, Janet Wutka, and followed by Javon Burton. At the end, we will have a chance for a question and answer period. And then we'll invite all of the media actually into our lab to be able to start walking through the code as well as see some of the maps. So there we go. I will be back in a few minutes. Are you ready, sir? Sure. Mayor Avula.
Well, good afternoon, friends. Thank you all so much for coming out today. For most of my career as a public health doc, my charge was to improve the health and well-being of communities. And over time, as we came to a better understanding of what actually moves the needle on health outcomes, we focused our efforts on addressing the social determinants of health. Things like access to quality education, stable living wage employment, family and community support systems, and housing and the built environment. And it was this broader understanding of health that ultimately compelled me to run for office. And on the campaign trail, where I spent 6 months every day talking to thousands of Richmond residents about what was important to them, the theme of neighborhoods and housing was central. Most pointedly, the challenge of housing affordability, as everyone from long-term generational residents of neighborhoods like mine, to college students, to middle-aged working families, all expressed how difficult it was getting for them to stay in the city. Now, Richmond has undoubtedly been on the rise over the past decade, and as a result, people from all over the country have discovered what we have all known for years about our city, that Richmond is an amazing place to live. And all that attention has actually led us to a housing crisis, because tens of thousands of new residents have found their way to Richmond, but the problem is that we haven't built tens of thousands of new homes, and that has driven up the cost of housing precipitously. So back in January, I announced a comprehensive plan to address Richmond's housing crisis built around two goals: more homes for more people, and helping residents stay in their homes. And when I look back over the last 7 or 8 months, I can see how together we have made some really remarkable progress. Working with City Council, we established predictable funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, setting aside 2.5% of real estate tax revenue for the construction and preservation of more affordable housing for more people. We continue to strengthen the administration of our anti-displacement tools, from owner-occupied home repair and rehabilitation programs to crisis response funds and to real estate tax relief for older adults and people with disabilities. And we are building a stronger and more resident-centered partnership with RHA, including a new framework for the redevelopment of Gilpin Court that'll serve as a template of how we will work together to accelerate redevelopment in all of our public housing communities. And now, it's time to finalize another important piece of this work. As we plan for the future of our city, it turns out that much of what contributes to the health and well-being of a community, safe and affordable housing, green space, making neighborhoods more walkable and bikeable, increasing access to mass transit, all of that is baked into the rules that a community creates to define the built environment, which is our zoning code. So our current zoning code was adopted back in 1976, over 50 years ago. And for the decades prior to that, our zoning code was used very explicitly to keep people of color out of some neighborhoods and in others. And our zoning code is actually what cemented much of the racial and socioeconomic segregation that we see across the city today. It's concentrated wealth in some communities and poverty in others. We've also seen how concentrating commercial and automotive and service business zoning to major corridors on the south side has limited the kind of attractive, walkable, human-scale growth that we have seen in other parts of the city, which has further driven inequity. The rules that govern how we design and build our city matter tremendously, and we are long overdue to write new ones. And I get that zoning code will not make anybody's top 10 list of what they love about Richmond, anyone except for Kevin Vonk, probably. But it is one of the most important tools that we have to shape our growing city into a place where everyone can thrive. It's why the Richmond 300, our city's master plan that was adopted by City Council back in 2020 after an award-winning community engagement process, it's why that plan explicitly names rewriting our zoning code as the first and the most important of the 6 big moves that Richmond must make to ensure that the future development of our city reflects our values and our shared vision. So today, I am excited to release version 3 of the code refresh, the update to our outdated zoning code, which will help us build more homes for more people, so that as we welcome new neighbors, we're protecting opportunities for longtime residents to stay. We've heard people say that they want density that makes sense, and we totally agree. And so this version does that by encouraging increased density in nodes and along major transit corridors throughout the city. It does it by improving the existing ADU regulations, by increasing the allowed size of ADUs to 1,200 square feet, while also requiring that ADUs better fit the context of the lot, and by evenly distributing zoning districts across the city and spreading new development equitably. It helps us build connected and vibrant neighborhoods and a diverse economy by allowing neighborhood-appropriate small-scale office and retail uses to better connect neighbors to goods and services, and by bringing existing homes and businesses into zoning compliance, actually legalizing the unique character that already exists in so many of our neighborhoods. It helps us build beautiful communities that preserve the character of our existing neighborhoods and the distinct aesthetic that makes so many places in Richmond special, because it maintains existing city old and historic districts to ensure the longevity of Richmond's most architecturally significant neighborhoods. It establishes contextual heights and setbacks and stepbacks so that new development better complements the existing built environment. And it creates a framework for new design and demolition overlay districts, which actually gives neighborhoods the ability to set development standards that are important to them. And finally, it helps us build a sustainable city by expanding amazing parks and green spaces into every corner of the city by creating a new designation of open space zoning. It establishes citywide vegetation space requirements, which means that no new parcel in the city can be developed without some percentage of green space. And it sets minimum tree canopy standards, which both protect trees that are growing here today, but also requires the planting of more trees to make sure that we're improving our city's overall tree canopy. The process to get to today's launch of draft 3 of the code refresh has been an exercise in listening well. This draft, I really believe, is better because people engaged with it. Across all 9 council districts, through pop-ups and town halls, through office hours and work sessions, public meetings and conversations with everyone from longtime homeowners to renters to neighbors that are brand new to Richmond, we heard so many diverse perspectives. And that diversity of perspective allowed us to land on a set of thoughtful recommendations that are found in version 3. And so I want to highlight a few really important examples. First, we heard residents' concerns about the number of units that should be permitted by right in residential districts. And as a result, this proposal maintains the 1+1 concept, the right for homeowners to have 1 primary dwelling and 1 attached or detached accessory dwelling unit. We are recommending improvements to the effectiveness of our ADU regulation by increasing the allowable size of the ADU to 1,200 square feet and adding contextual requirements, which is a change, but an incremental change that should allay concerns that the code refresh will somehow dramatically change the character of neighborhoods. And at the same time, it creates a better solution that provides more housing options. Second, we heard lots of concerns from residents on the south side about new development in a part of the city that has retained more suburban zoning since it was annexed and hasn't received the investment needed to help integrate it into the city. And so the proposed updates allow more investment on corridors, which is in accordance with our master plan, while still requiring SUPs for more intense development in neighborhoods. Third, special use permits and community involvement in our land use decision-making are not going away, but they are getting right-sized. We want to make sure that we're not adding time and cost to projects that clearly fit the context of a neighborhood, but have just not made their way into our 50-year-old zoning code. And fourth, we have corrected inequitable overzoning in historically African-American communities like Westwood, protecting some of our most resilient neighborhoods. Getting here has not been easy, but rigorous debate and challenging compromises are the essence of our democracy. And they're the hallmark of how I want our administration to lead Richmond forward. And so what we are proposing today is a result of listening well and making changes and finding compromises. I am incredibly grateful for the immense amount of work by our planning and development team, for the ongoing engagement of our city council members, and for the time and input and perspective of the thousands of Richmond residents that have come into this code refresh process. Our work has been made better because of your involvement. So here it is, draft 3. And I want to invite you to explore the code firsthand on our website, rva.gov/code refresh. There's been a lot of misinformation out there, and it's important enough that you go and see it for yourself and make sure you understand what's in the proposal. We will also be launching our education campaign because there's so much technical stuff in the zoning code, and so our teams will be distributing information, breaking it down, and answering questions at town halls and community events all over the city over the next couple of months. So Richmond, I am asking for your support as we present this to City Council for their further discussion and consideration, and I hope ultimately their adoption, because this is a roadmap for the future Richmond that reflects our values and our shared vision. More homes for more people, connected neighborhoods, beautiful communities, and a sustainably built city for generations to come. Thank you so much. All right, next up, I'd like to invite Councilman Breton.
Can you guys hear me okay? Should I raise this up? Thank you, everyone. So I am Councilmember Breton. I represent the 1st District, a district that has paid very close attention to every draft of this process. I also want to say that my colleague, Ellen Robertson, had also intended to be here today to show her support for this process and for the release of this draft, but unfortunately she was called away this morning for a family emergency. So Councilmember Robertson is probably the city's greatest champion for housing and housing affordability, and so I am honored to represent her here today, though the words I'm using today reflect my own perspective. So the reason that I am here today is to show my gratitude and support for the engagement and the responsiveness and the compromise that has led this draft of the Code Refresh to be one that I believe everyone will be able to support. I myself have spent hours reviewing the previous drafts, listening to residents, relaying questions to the departments, and getting answers. We had questions as specific and narrow as a particular parcel on the map, and as broad as topics such as stormwater readiness, right? We asked those questions, we got those answers, and in many cases, we saw legitimate issues in prior drafts were resolved and fixed in later drafts. So, and that is a testament to the engagement process, the listening. It is clear that this department has read every single comment that they've received, and every draft has been better for it. Now, a concrete example I really want to celebrate is the one that Mayor Avula mentioned, which is that reduction in the density in the single-family detached zones, where previous drafts had potentially proposed up to 3 units on any property. They called it 2+1. And based on feedback from residents, I recommended and requested that we reduce that back to the 1+1 that he said. That primary dwelling for every family plus an accessory dwelling unit, that 1+1, which is actually required by state law and also a standard we've already had here in Richmond for many years. So I believe that that is the right and careful approach, and I'm grateful to see that the city has come together on that. And I think there will be many nervous residents that will breathe a sigh of relief when they see that update. There are a lot of other improvements in this draft that are a testament to the engagement. There were residents who were concerned that we might be incentivizing and encouraging excessive teardowns, and we'll see or lot splitting. And so we'll see, for example, that the minimum lot widths have been increased in this draft, right, to reduce the possibility of those things. These are all the ways that this draft is taking a careful approach that residents are really going to appreciate and that I appreciate as their representative. Now, there are also lots of brand new protections that we've never had the benefit of before that I'm really excited to support in the code refresh. For example, for the first time, we will have tree canopy minimums in developments, right? So trees will be safer after code refresh. For the first time, we will have contextual height limits that prevent a new development from towering too tall over the neighboring structures. So developments will be more compatible after code refresh. We're eliminating any by right use of data centers in any of our industrial zones. So our water and energy will be safer after code refresh. So these are some of the new protections that have brought about, in addition to all the other benefits of those encouraging walkability and better access to walkable mixed-use communities. Now, remember, of course, affordability and preservation are some of the key goals of the master plan, key goals of most of us here in the city of Richmond. And it's important to remember that the code refresh supports those, and it is also the necessary first step in a longer journey. The work continues. The city is a living thing, our code is a living document, and the work never stops. So we will be implementing and passing the Cultural Heritage Stewardship Plan to create those neighborhood zoning overlays that the mayor talked about. And we will continue to be adding to our array of affordability programs. I'm very excited to mention and highlight that just last month I introduced with the mayor Ordinance 2026-190, which will create the committee for a new affordable dwelling unit program, utilizing new powers granted to us this year by the General Assembly, thanks to Richmond's own Ray Cousins, Delegate Ray Cousins. So, with the release of the new draft, my office still has a lot of details to verify and to check. So we expect to spend a lot of time doing that. We also expect to hear from a lot of our residents, and we're excited to encourage them to do that. The success of this process so far has been reliant on that resident engagement, and the continued success will continue to do so. So I'm really excited to dive in with everyone else and to hear from my residents. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Crippen. I'm actually a resident on the South Side, and I'm actually on the board chair of Virginia Community Voice. And we're actually excited about Code Refresh and the new things that it can actually bring to our community. Being in a food desert and not having the things that we need, this will actually help our process. Everyone that knows me, especially on the South Side of my group, I scream about a grocery store all the time. I even have meeting receipts from 2013 with the economic developer talking about grocery stores. So that is my thing. I'm excited about the draft 3 because of, we always talk about the density that is needed. And I know that some of the constituents on South Side may not be for it, but I believe with the mixed use, with having the residencies living above businesses, that can help bring in more businesses into Southside. Most folks know, as far as, that the city is had some trust issues on Southside, but one thing that we would like to do as a resident, being with Virginia Community Voice, I actually volunteered to actually do what the mayor talked about and actually be one of those residents to help educate about Code Refresh on the South Side. And lastly, I'll leave you guys with this. I have been engaged in the process ever since the first master plan and those meetings that the mayor talked about. And, we just want to make sure that the citizens and the community, actually, their voices are being heard on this. And we actually appreciate everyone for actually doing that. Mayor Avula, he's one of the first mayors I ever met that when you talk to him, he pulls out a pen and a paper. He actually listens to you. So I appreciate him for that, and I will turn it back over to you all.
I was going to say that needs to come down. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Janet Woodka. I am a very, very happy resident of the great city of Richmond. I have lived here for about 7 years, and I live on the south side in Manchester, and I'm a District 6 resident as well. I'm also a member of the Manchester Alliance, and I got involved. I'm happy to be here today to be here in support of the code refresh and the process that has been ongoing now for a while now, I think. I got involved in code refresh because I live in a neighborhood that was targeted for massive redevelopment. We are targeted for density, and I think we've kind of delivered on the density at this point. But because of the current code, we haven't necessarily gotten the livability that we wanted in our neighborhood. The current code doesn't allow for a lot of things when you get a lot of new development. It doesn't allow for tree wells. It doesn't allow for a tree canopy. It doesn't allow for wider sidewalks or for thinking about the new development in context. So I got involved because I had been involved in a lot of SUPs and a lot of property being rezoned. And one of the challenges was we kept being told that we can't look at the whole street. We can't look at the whole neighborhood. We can only consider this particular property. And that ended up with some anomalies and some things, again, that have decreased the livability in our neighborhood, and we're having to put things back, which should have been a part of the process in the beginning. The current code just doesn't reflect those realities. I wasn't in favor of code refresh in the beginning. I'm gonna flat out say that. I didn't like the first maps, but the amount of outreach, the amount of conversation that has gone on, every draft has improved. I'm curious to see this draft, but I feel very confident that it has. But from my perspective, in dealing with the city on a lot of different issues, in this instance, the planning and development team listened, really listened. If they couldn't do something, if they couldn't change something, there was really a pretty good reason for why they couldn't. But for the most part, I think they listened, they adapted, they changed a lot. What I was curious about was, why were we proposing certain things? Why were we proposing increased height in Manchester when we already have 18-story buildings? So do we really need to go any higher? Could we get wider sidewalks? Could we get a park? And so I stayed engaged. I asked a lot of questions, had a lot of meetings. I'm sure Kevin and his team are really done with responding to all my emails. But again, I saw the process improved. I'm really looking forward to seeing this current draft, this draft 3. Is it gonna have everything I want? Probably not. Is it gonna be better than what we have? I feel very confident that it will be. And I look forward to reading it, talking to other people, talking to other residents of Manchester, talking to other people in the city about why I think this is a good idea and why we needed to fix the current code. Change is happening in Richmond. It's not gonna stop. And I think this is a big step forward in trying to create a system that can actually adapt to that change, create livable communities, create walkable communities, have communities where you do have trees and green space and affordable housing for everyone. Because what makes Richmond great is our diversity. It's the diversity of housing, it's the diversity of people, it's the diversity of types of housing. And I'm just super happy to see this process go forward in the way it has, and I look forward to continuing to be engaged.
Good afternoon. I'm Javon Burton. I'm the Executive Director for the Partnership for Housing Affordability. And I'm excited to be here for the draft, the launch of Draft 3 and the next important step in Richmond's code refresh process. At PHA, we believe that good housing policy starts with understanding the problem that we're trying to solve. And here in Richmond, it's pretty clear when you look at the data. Richmond has more than 237,000 residents, and we're expected to approach around 276,000 by 2050. And at the same time, increasing housing costs are out of pace with what current Richmonders can actually afford. Since 2019, median household income has increased by about 37%, while median home values have increased by 53%. Today, more than half of Richmond renters are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs, and 28% of those renters are actually spending at least a half of their income on housing. The typical Richmond household today can afford a home priced at around $188,000, and yet the median home sales price for Richmond today is around $380,000. We can't lower housing costs by wishing demand away, but we can lower them by refusing to make scarcity our public policy. If our standard is a Richmond where working folks can afford to live, then we have to judge our policies by whether they meet that standard. So the question before us is, do we have the rules in place to make it easier to solve that affordability challenge, or do they make it harder? And that's why zoning matters. Zoning is not an affordable housing program. It doesn't control interest rates or construction costs or household incomes, and changing the code is not going to make suddenly every single new home more affordable. But it does establish the rules. It determines what we can build, where we can build it, and whether or not we have more options to solve this issue. And that means we have a choice. We can have rules that make it more difficult for housing supply and housing production and choices to respond to a growing city, or we can have rules that give us more options, and that's what Draft 3 is attempting to do. Code Refresh is an opportunity to look at the rules that we've inherited and to ask whether they're helping Richmond meet the moment. We should listen to residents, we should ask thoughtful questions, and we should be thoughtful about how neighborhoods grow and change, but we should also be clear about the alternatives. And when more people want to live in Richmond, housing costs are already outpacing incomes, and more than half of renters are spending more than what they should on housing. Maintaining unnecessary barriers to production does not make the affordability challenge any easier. The standard should be simple. Are we making the problem easier to solve or harder to solve? If we don't make room for more housing, the market will keep making less room for more Richmonders. PHA believes that Richmond has an opportunity through Code Refresh to make it easier. Thank you.
And so that will conclude our prepared remarks. We can now open it up for question and answer, and I'll ask Mayor Avula to join me at the podium, please. Yes, sir.
Yes, Charles Pyle with WRVA. Mr. Mayor, you ticked off the three things that you felt were the key revisions here. Of those three, which do you see as the revision that is most likely to reassure Richmonders who are uneasy about this whole process, uneasy about what they've heard about Code Refresh and how it might impact their neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think probably the 2+1 to 1+1 was the biggest sticking point, right? I think just the sense that lots all over the city could have three distinct buildings was overwhelming to people, and so we heard that. And so, we already had a 1+1 provision through the ADU laws that were passed several years ago, and so this kind of tweaked that ADU provision to actually make those ADUs a useful addition to the housing market.
So, if I may follow up just a second, so do you think that will be a key thing in kind of like dialing the controversy around this back?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a lot of what I mentioned that we're going to start our education campaign. We're going to have our teams go out and do community meetings and answer questions and kind of push out the information, and that'll be a core component of it for sure.
Hey, Sarah Vogelsong at the Richmonder. Kind of following up on that is that one of the arguments that has been made in favor of the 2+1 provision is that it would help further development be more equitable rather than concentrating it more in less affluent neighborhoods and kind of allowing more affluent neighborhoods to essentially, quote unquote, opt out of growth. Can you talk about how the city's kind of approaching that equity goal when it's getting rid of the 2+1?
Yeah, I think that's where the compromise of having a larger +1 that can actually serve as a cheaper housing option kind of meets the tries to find the sweet spot in between those two things, you know? So, not everybody's gonna do it, right? We've had ADU laws in place for 3 years. We have not seen that many ADUs get added, but now, if you can add a 1,200 square foot, ultimately, if this all gets passed, right? If you can add a 1,200 square foot dwelling in a backyard or attached to your residence, the numbers might actually work for more people to do that. And so, that's our hope, is that we see this spur on a lot of new construction of, the first house I ever owned was like 1,100 square feet, right? And so I do think it creates just another, it meets a gap in the market that currently exists of homes that people can rent at affordable rates so I don't know if that answers the question, but really it is about like more options that are affordable, and that's how we get to the equity goal.
Hi, Carrie Pfeiffer, Axios Richmond. Sort of piggybacking off Sarah's question, I know she's actually reported that, I think from stats the city gave her, something like 57% of the city's land right now is single-family housing. With removing this extra homes or 2+, I forget the equation now, where will the new housing go?
Okay, so let me kind of clarify the 1 + 1, 2 + 1 coverage. So the 57% of homes that are zoned for single-family housing, you can right now on any of those lots build an ADU, and the current rule is that it's got to be 500 square feet or a third of the house size. By our new proposal that allows for the addition of a 1,200 square foot ADU, you're actually creating the opportunity for a bunch of new, potential homes for people to get built on existing single-family lots.
But wouldn't that, how do people who are not able to be homeowners now get into that market?
Yeah, it does not solve that issue necessarily, right? Because it's people who are already own homes in this market that can then choose to build a larger ADU and create a home that's a more affordable rental. So it doesn't solve the issue of more affordable home ownership, and frankly that's like a really challenging issue to solve, right? Like we will have to use the more traditional tools of down payment assistance and public subsidy, which we've done in other communities for home ownership, but I think the vast majority of the development we see is going to be more ADUs on single family homes and then more mixed income, more multifamily developments.
Thank you. Kay Manzanares with BPM News. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe what the city plans to introduce in terms of, down payment assistance or tools that can be leveraged in order to reach that affordability point for people who are renting in the city?
You're for renting?
Yes.
Okay. So, we have a whole bunch of different tools that are administered by our Department of Housing and Community Development. And so, every new building project where either the city owns the land and wants to make sure that there's an affordability component, or we want to incentivize private developers, we are going to use our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right? So that's a way that we can put public money into a project to guarantee a certain rental rate for a certain number of years, right? And the specifics of that differ with every job, and it's what Merrick and his team, when they're doing the underwriting to figure out how much money are we going to put into a project, how much affordability does that guarantee for future residents. There are our performance grant program that we've been using for the last few years. We will continue to use that. And as I mentioned with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we now have this dedicated 2.5% real estate tax increase that will go directly into HTF money. So we know that we're going to get a certain amount of revenue every year into the HTF. Partnering with the Maggie Walker Land Trust to kind of keep the cost of the land lower for prospective homeowners if they choose to buy would be one solution from home ownership. So, that slate of tools continues to be the same, and we've shored it up by some of the ordinances that we've put into place. And that we'll continue to look for other ways, because at this point, the only way to really achieve affordability is through public subsidy. And so it's going to take public money through multiple pathways, whether those are local options like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or whether they're state options like a LIHTC or other grant programs through Virginia Housing. But all of those kind of come to bear.
Hi, Nia McMillan with 8 News. You talked a little bit about more green spaces in the community in areas like Gilpin Court. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important and also how Draft 3 plans on implementing that for community members?
Yeah, I mean, the presence of green space from just wellness, health and well-being, a public health lens, it's good for mental health. It's good for community gathering. It's good for a place where you can just go and experience nature, even if it's a small park in a small neighborhood. But the tree canopy addition to that green space is really important for other reasons, right? We have seen huge disparities in temperatures and heat-related illness and all of the outcomes when you live in a concrete jungle like many of our public housing communities have been. And so the addition of tree canopy requirements to new developments, the addition of green space and tree requirements all over the city will help us work towards our sustainability goals. So I think those are some of the elements of why that's so important, whether we're talking about public housing or whether we're just talking about new developments across the board. I mean, Janet kind of talked about the development we've seen in Manchester, a similar situation in Scott's Addition, where the opportunity zones from several years ago really spurred on a lot of new development. But without these requirements around tree canopy and green space, you saw a lot of, buildings taking up the full lot without a commitment to putting in new trees. And so this version of the code refresh really addresses that in positive ways for our city.
Sarah at the Richmonder again. Obviously, this has to get city council approval. There was a good bit of skepticism at the work sessions that you all held in July, I think, about Draft 2. Do you think that you can get the support on city council to get this across the finish line?
Yeah, I in my remarks very intentionally pointed out the degree of engagement we've had with council, right? The vast majority of our council members have had multiple meetings with my team, with the mayor's office, with Kevin and his team, have really gotten into the nitty-gritty details of the versions, have shared what they need to see to be able to represent their constituents well. And I think this version does that. It really represents all of those voices and gets us to a really good place of compromise that heard the major themes that constituents were raising through their council members. So yeah, I feel really optimistic. Ultimately, we still got to get the votes, and we'll continue to do that work. But I do feel good, and have had really positive feedback from members of council on both the process and what is ending up in this version.
Oh, could you talk a little bit about the what's in the Draft 3 that it would help preserve neighborhoods like Westwood?
Yeah, so, historically, what we've seen in historically African-American neighborhoods in the old code is that they had really expansive or permissive zoning rules, which would allow for, you to come into a neighborhood in the 7th district and build a 12-story building. And so what we've tried to do is really right-size that, and looking at historically black neighborhoods, downzone those so that there's a more equitable distribution of what zoning looks like. So you're not just putting all of the density into historically black neighborhoods.
So does it tie zoning regulation with a historic designation of a neighborhood?
Kevin? But, what's the answer? Yeah, you want to speak to that? I don't.
Thanks. Kim Jabong, Director of Planning Development Review. So there is not a specific historic designation for Westwood at this point, but as the mayor mentioned, generally, and this is really relevant in our 1976 code, a lot of neighborhoods that were predominantly of black households had a zoning district that was above and beyond what was, I'll say, the same kind of characteristics on the ground for white neighborhoods. And so for Westwood example right today, most of the West End is zoned R4 residential district. Westwood is zoned R5. It's one notch above, so it allows you to build something a little bit bigger, a little bit denser. And so what we were trying to do in terms of saying right sizing is that is like, look, regardless of the household demographics, we are looking at what is on the ground, and this neighborhood is going to be zoned all the same. I think in addition to that, the parts of adding contextual standards, and so that is in Westwood, right, there are a lot of single-story structures. So that new structures that are coming in, contextual height, saying, all right, you can only be a story taller than that structure that's there. Applying that to the accessory dwelling units, those accessory dwelling units have to be shorter than the houses that are there existing. So it's trying to say, hey, we understand that neighborhoods are going to evolve, but it's trying to do that in a very sensible incremental way so that it happens more gradually over time instead of just an exchange from rapid development. And as the mayor said, yes, there are some cases where you might have just 1 and 2 unit homes on the ground, but we've zoned it currently to allow for pretty dense multifamily. And so what we're doing is just trying to address and reflect what is there currently on the ground. And I think we did that in Westwood, and we did that in a lot of neighborhoods throughout the city.
So, just so I understand, if this current version basically decreases the upzoning in residential neighborhoods, and we're already talking about how in historically black neighborhoods, we're basically downzoning, are you sacrificing on some level the primary goal here, which is to increase housing starts in the city? If the objective, one of the primary objectives is to increase housing, market rate housing, which drops, has a ripple effect and lowers prices. Do we know what the benchmarks are in terms of where this thing needs to be in 5 years in terms of housing starts? Mm-hmm. Are you sacrificing the ultimate goal here, which is increase housing?
Remember that's not everybody's ultimate goal, right? And so part of the compromise process is really hearing what different residents and different constituents want for their community. I think that some of these changes actually do limit the total number of units, but we've done so much right sizing of the zoning on corridors and on high density nodes that it will make it easier to build more units. Now, will it make it easy to build as many as some people want? No, but that's the nature of getting to a zoning code that all of our city and all of our city council can ultimately live with. And that's why, it's a give and take.
Are there overarching objectives in terms of housing starts, what you're looking to get to in order to, bring down prices more broadly?
And Kevin, you feel free to jump in if you want, but, we have definitely, so Javon represents Partnership for Housing Affordability. They've done a lot of work at the regional level. I think was the number 40,000, Javon, of affordable housing units that would be needed region-wide. Our share of that, again, affordable units would be somewhere around 10,000. We'd like to do a little more than that over the next 5 years. So it's a loose goal. Over the last 5 years, we have 5,300 units that of affordable units, subsidized units that are already either finished or in the pipeline. So, I think we can definitely hit our subsidized affordability goals. Now, the broader question of how many total units do we need, right? The projected population of Richmond by 2050 of being somewhere around 275,000. Obviously we'll tweak that every year. The census estimates that just came out put us at 241, right? I think that's probably moving ahead of the pace of growth that we were anticipating. So I think we will have to revisit these every year and just look at what that population growth curve. The hope is that we can build fast enough over the next 5 to 10 years that it kind of levels out the rising in housing costs that we've seen, but we've got to use, and the zoning code is not the only tool that we're going to use, right? The zoning code is one tool that makes it easier to build, but we've got to use all the different tools to make it happen.
Okay, great. So if anyone has any other technical-esque questions. Our planning department is actually going to be over here in the lab as we start pulling through the plan. We have a couple of maps up, so you guys are welcome to go that way. And I thank everyone for attending. Have a great day.
Can you guys clear some space for the camera operator entering the computer lab? He's good.